Hey, Alicia Novin here, and today I'm going to talk about 4 things that you as a manager can do in your one-on-ones. Here we go. Before getting started, I think it's worth stating that a one-on-one is not meant for a status meeting or to track progress on any kind of project. It's meant for your direct report, and it's to give them the time and space to bring up anything that might be on their mind. So anything in terms of growth or obstacles they face, challenges, just getting your ear about things that they're faced with. And so with that in mind, you want to make sure that you're having them very regularly. One every week, or if you have a larger team, maybe every 2 weeks. And if you can't make it 1 week, or for some reason you have to reschedule, make sure you reschedule, don't skip them. So with all that in mind, let's start with number 1. A great way to start a one-on-one is just to simply ask your direct report what is on their mind and what they'd like to talk about. The whole one-on-one is for them, and they are the main topic of that meeting. So they should be the one driving the conversation and telling you about anything that they'd like to talk about. And with some people, you might have to steer the conversation or ask very direct questions about what obstacles and challenges they might be facing, or if they've thought about how they want to grow in their careers. And that'll help them kind of think in the right type of framework, especially if they've never really had one-on-ones before. And if they come to you and they start giving you a status update on a project, you might want to remind them again about the purpose of the one-on-one, but also keep an ear out for what they're really talking about, because sometimes hidden and tucked away inside that status update, they'll often tell you about some challenge that they're faced with, or maybe they have a conflict with a team member, or they need some resources that they've not been able to get a hold of. So you want to keep an ear out for those kinds of things, but ultimately remember that they're the ones to guide the conversation. Let them know that, and just let them basically drive it. After you've asked your direct report what's on their mind and you talk it through and eventually you hit that conversational lull, a good question to then ask them is basically just what else is on their mind. And that's known as the "and what else" question, and it comes from this book called The Coaching Habit. And in that book they talk about how when you ask the "and what else" question, that you go deeper into the conversation, that the first time you ask just what's on someone's mind, you stay at the surface, whereas that "and what else" gets into deeper topics. And when I first read that, I just thought it was a little hokey, and I didn't quite really believe that it would be that effective, but I just tried it, and remarkably, every time that I've ever had an important issue get raised in a one-on-one, it was in response to my asking what else is on their mind. And you can't ask it in a contrived way, it has to be a genuine question. But what's interesting about it is that I let some of my direct reports know that I was going to ask that question. I even told them that this is the book that it came from. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm curious to see where it goes. And even with them knowing the purpose behind my asking that question, the fact that it was a genuine ask that I was making of them, and I was curious to know what else was on their mind, it really revealed some interesting conversations. And I think that it's an important one that often gets overlooked, because if you just stay at that surface, you don't get to important issues. But every time I've asked it, every time I've said, what else is on your mind, people then kind of take a pause, and then they dig a little deeper, and they tell me something that's actually really important for me to know. So give it a shot, ask them what else. I think it's important to continuously talk about growth. Even if your direct report is not necessarily actively thinking about growth, it's the kind of thing that you don't want to not bring up regularly. So you might ask them just how they feel about the overall pace of their growth, if there's anything that they would like or could use in terms of understanding how they grow, and really get an understanding of how they think they need to grow in the industry, what areas they need to focus on. They might ask you for your feedback about their weaknesses, but it's important for you to get a sense of what they think growth looks like. And oftentimes I've felt and seen that growth is focused too much on just the technical stuff and not really the larger areas in terms of, how they contribute to culture or how they help support the rest of the team. And those are all really important things that people need to think about and keep in the back of their minds. there's a great resource that I've talked about a lot, and I will always point you to it, and it's by Dropbox, and it's their technical career framework. And in that, it gives rankings of different levels of software engineers or quality assurance engineers, and you can see that career progression and how things change as they go from one level to the next. And it's not always about technical proficiency. It's sometimes about building ownership or being responsible for larger areas that are longer in term of 1 or 2 year projects. And so those kinds of things, when you make them a part of your conversation, for those who have never really deliberately thought about their growth, it can be very enlightening and it can be very, very helpful. But ultimately, you want to make sure that they're the ones driving that conversation, that you're moving at a pace that they're comfortable with. And I know a lot of people might even avoid this topic because they think that it's risky to talk about growth, because if you're constantly trying to grow your team members, that they'll eventually grow beyond that role. But I'll promise you that if you're not talking about it with them regularly, that's going to happen one way or the other, and it's better for you to be a part of that conversation. People often talk about this idea of active listening and making sure that you are fully engaged in what the other person is saying. And that's really challenging in a world where you have a smartphone and a smartwatch, and your desktop is constantly, lighting up to give you notifications about just about everything that's happening. And you want to make sure that you eliminate all those kinds of distractions and focus on the person. And the best recommendation I have is go for a walk with them, grab a coffee or a lunch with them. Get yourself out of the office situation. Even just sitting in your office with your laptop beside you or your screen still on can be very distracting. You might think that you're paying attention to them, but anything can just pop up at any second that will get your attention. It'll take you out of that conversation. So go for a walk and just be engaged with that person. It's a lot more intimate. And maybe you can't do that if you're both in different cities and you're remote and having a lot of virtual meetings, but that doesn't mean that you can't still go for a walk and talk to them on your phone. You can be in a different spot where you're not tempted to look at anything. And if you're talking to them on the phone, you're a lot more likely to be listening and engaged, and it'll just make the conversation better overall. Encourage them to do the same thing. Tell them to go for a walk while you go, and you can talk about your surroundings and what you're seeing. But the important thing is that you want to make sure that they get the sense that you are fully there to listen and hear what they have to say. I hope you'll try these 4 things. I think they're probably the most critical aspects of what being a manager means, because ultimately you are there to serve your team, and their needs should always take precedent over any work that you might have. And so make sure that you give them a shot. Another thing that I'll just quickly throw out as kind of a bonus is one that I recently read that I think is a fantastic idea, and it's about making your 4th one-on-one a retrospective on your one-on-ones. So that way you can continuously improve your one-on-ones with that individual. You can ask what's working and what's not working and what should change. And that'll allow them to be a part of that process, and it'll give them the opportunity to really shape it in a way that'll be more meaningful for them. So that was a little bonus one I'll throw in there, but ultimately it's all about making sure that you are there to support your team members and give them anything that they need. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found this helpful and useful. Tell me what you think in the comments. And otherwise, I'll just pitch the fact that I've got Increments, which is a podcast that I run. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. It's a different conversation, more centered around our growth and creating the space for us to really think more intentionally about how we want to grow in our careers. I hope you'll check it out, and thanks a lot.